Well, if you couldn't tell from the dozens and dozens of billboards that line Interstate 44, Missouri has a lot of caves. The Fantastic Caverns, the Merrimack Caverns, all of them claiming to be the best, and all of them enticing you, come, take a tour. My family and I took advantage of one of those invitations recently. In the fall, we took a tour of a cave that was near Silver Dollar City there. Actually, underneath Silver Dollar City, underneath the park, they have a cave, and you wouldn't be able to tell from up above how vast this connection of caverns was just beneath your feet. It was really quite remarkable. The tour guide showed us a cathedral room that was so tall that you could fit the Statue of Liberty inside. Showed us an underground waterfall. He showed us rock formations and a very intricate maze of tunnels and these pathways that went on for miles. Just an amazing experience. And just as fascinating as the cave was the story of how the cave was found and the early explorers that went bravely into that dark and dangerous world with very little technology. Because while we rode pretty safely on a slow-moving elevator down to the bottom of the cave, they had to use a 60-foot wooden ladder. While our footing was sure because of the poured concrete on the pathways and the iron handrails, they never knew what was going to happen on their next step with all the loose gravel and the steep drop-offs. Well, we had the peace of mind of having park security there. They would never be able to tell if there were bandits or outlaws. While the commercialism had driven away most of the wildlife, they would have had to contend with spiders and snakes and bats, lots of bats. In fact, this cave was once mined for guano, if that gives you an idea of how many bats were in there. We saw one on the tour, but apparently there were millions more back in the pathways of the cave. And while we enjoyed the industrial lighting that lit the way for us, they would have had only a candlestick. At one point in the tour, the guide said, just for a moment, I'm going to ask you turn off your cell phones, turn off your watch, don't let anything, with light turn on. We're going to turn off the lights, and you're going to see what it's like in total darkness. And so for a moment, he turned off the lights, and sure enough, you could not see your hand in front of your face. It was total darkness. It was deep darkness. And he said, imagine if you were this deep in the cave and your candle went out. How would you survive? And I thought there was no way you're going to survive that. You try to kind of go back the way you came. You can't see where you're stepping. You might smack your head on a stalactite or trip on a stalagmite. You might get lost in one of the many pathways. You might get stuck. You might fall down one of these sudden drop-offs. There were so many things that could go wrong. The darkness itself was disorienting. Deep darkness is how Isaiah depicts the spiritual state of the Israelites during the time that he was God's spokesman to them. He said, you are living in deep darkness, and it was because they had turned away from God, because they hadn't been living according to his commands, because his love and his promises no longer meant anything to them. And Isaiah says that's darkness, that's deep darkness. And the problem was they had put out their own candle. They had lost the light by their own fault. He says here in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 19, he writes, when someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. So Isaiah is calling them out for listening to all sorts of voices other than the voice of their living God. They even went so far as to consult fortune tellers and mediums. And Isaiah says, what are you doing that for? You have the Word of God right there. To not consult the Word of God is to walk into the darkness without that light. He says, distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. And when they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. And then they will look toward earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness.